Donkey Kong 64 is fucking bananas. Just look at this commercial.
Donkey Kong is back in an adventure so big, it's taking the country by storm.
In reaction, the governor has called in additional troops.
We believe one of them looks like this.
That is the worst Donkey Kong I've ever seen. Donkey Kong 64 is often considered to be an honorary Banjo-Kazooie game. A common misconception is that Banjo-Kazooie is a collectathon, but please understand this. If you still believe Banjo is a collectathon, then I got some bad news for you. In Banjo-Kazooie, you collect 100 Jiggies, 900 notes, 45 Jinjos, and variable quantities of Mumbo tokens, feathers, honey, eggs, and extra lives. Sounds like a lot. Now in Donkey Kong 64, you collect 200 golden bananas, 3,500 color-coded bananas, 40 banana tokens, 40 banana medals, 40 blueprints, 20 banana fairies, 10 battle crowns, and 8 golden keys. Not to mention watermelons, ammo for each character, explosive oranges, crystal coconuts, ammo for your musical instruments, a Nintendo token, and a Rareware token. Plus, here's one more golden banana for good measure. Donkey Kong 64 is a massive game with levels that are very large and yet surprisingly dense with content. It's so big, even Banjo-Kazooie looks small in comparison. Each level has a specific theme. There's the jungle, desert, factory, stupid, water. It offers a lot of variety. And speaking of variety, the game makes you play as 5 different characters who all have unique powers and abilities, which creates massive variety in the core mechanics of the game. The characters have so much personality to them. They're expressive and funny. Donkey Kong is just Donkey Kong. He's a big dumbass, but he's cool. Diddy Kong just loves the spotlight. Lanky Kong's a professional weirdo. He just kinda does his thing. Tiny Kong has a lot of attitude for someone who's not old enough to be hot yet. But Chunky is the best by far. This guy clocks in at 2,000 pounds, making him the strongest character by far, and despite this, he's a total bitch. This guy's weapon is a fucking pineapple launcher that's so big he has to mount it on his shoulder, but his musical instrument is a fucking triangle. Look at that thing, it's so tiny. It's so tiny that women laugh when they see it. Not unlike Banjo-Kazooie, this game requires a lot of exploration and observation. Scouring the land and searching every corner for treasure, it's awesome and very rewarding. There's a lot of simple and very intuitive stuff, which is nice, but sometimes you're required to use your head. Now, I enjoy the exploration for the most part. The only thing that really seems to bring it down is how only specific characters can collect specific items. Anything with a color code is only obtainable by the corresponding character. What this means is that to collect everything, you'll find yourself constantly walking back to the barrel, swapping characters to walk back to the item, then stumble upon another one that you can't collect, and then you gotta do it again. While I don't think that this is the deal breaker a lot of people make it out to be, I can't say with a straight face that it doesn't disrupt the flow of the game. But you know what? That's forgivable. But if there's one thing that I can't forgive, it's the minigames. Way too often, you find the game makes you play minigames for a golden banana. To me, it kinda seems like a cop-out. A very small minority of the minigames are fun, but typically they range from being brain-dead easy to mildly frustrating to fucking bullshit. And when I say bullshit, I mean this stupid shit where you have to chase beavers into a hole, but they just won't go. Alright, now look. I'm not about to tell you that difficulty in video games is a bad thing, but I believe that if you pushed a Canadian guy into wishing death upon all beavers, then you have fucked up. This wouldn't be so bad, except that the game is constantly recycling the minigames. You play each of these things at least 3 times each. That's not the only thing the game recycles either. At the end of each world is a boss, which is pretty cool, but 2 of the bosses are used twice. Mind you, they're harder the second time around. This isn't as big of an issue as the minigames because they actually added something here, whereas the minigames just get slightly more difficult each time. And to think that earlier I was praising the game's variety. As an honorary Banjo-Kazooie game, Donkey Kong 64 holds its own pretty well. It's not quite as satisfying as Banjo, but it works well enough. At first I thought it might be fair to say that the gameplay feels more sluggish, but on second thought, it seems to complement Donkey Kong's level design better. The level of personality and charm rivals that of Banjo, but in its own Donkey Kong way. Gameplay-wise, the thing about the color-coded collectibles holds it back in comparison to Banjo-Kazooie. On the other hand though, in Banjo-Kazooie, you don't take the notes off the world. meaning that if you missed some and left the level, they'd regenerate, and you'd have to beat your highest note score to collect more notes. Such is not the case with Donkey Kong 64, as everything you find is yours permanently. This relates back to a point I made several weeks ago about trimming the fat in video games. Another thing that DK64 does to trim the fat is the warp pads. This allows you to go from one part of the level to another instantaneously, which is godsend considering how big the levels are. Only issue is that each pad swaps only between a second pad with the same number, which can make things confusing. To be fair, the gameplay is often built around this mechanic in that only certain characters can reach certain places, and sometimes a character who's better suited to their environment can unlock the warp pad to gain someone else access. It's actually pretty cool, but it wouldn't be until Banjo-Tooie that warp pads would be perfected with the power of menus. You know, technology. But between the color-coded collectibles and the minigames, I'd say DK64 adds just a little more fat than it trims. Also, I feel I should point out that in Donkey Kong you can breathe underwater for some reason. Come to think of it, you can also breathe underwater in Donkey Kong Country. Is that canon? Are the Kongs amphibious? I want game theory on this right now. Yeah, that's right. Tell me how Diddy Kong is Sans and Kazooie is Monica and Chunky is Phone Guy's dad. On a technical level, this game is top-notch, which you'll find is common for Rare games. It's like their very purpose was just to repeatedly outdo themselves. It certainly looks better than Banjo-Kazooie, the textures are better, there's more detail, the world itself seems much more animated. There's all kinds of screen effects and lighting effects. Of course, this wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for the expansion pack, which not only increased the system's RAM, but also paved the way for countless reprehensible memes. I almost wonder why they didn't make a later N64 model with the expansion pack built in. It couldn't have been that hard to do, it was basically a RAM stick. Then again, I also wonder why they censored games that were already rated M.
Damn, those alien scum are gonna pay for shooting up my ride.
Why they sold Rare, why they fucked with Paper Mario, just why a lot of things. The sound department is top notch. The music is great, each song is so thematically spot on, and similar to Banjo, the mood of the music will actually change depending on which part of the level you're in. The transition is not quite as smooth as it is for Banjo-Kazooie, but it's used to a very similar effect, and it is in fact quite effective. It technically doesn't change when you go underwater, but it does become more quiet and echoey, which means they at least did something, and let's be real here, it's the thought that counts, isn't it? Just the very fact that they cared enough to do that, that's nice. Donkey Kong 64 is a great game with a handful of setbacks. These aren't deal breakers per se, but they are dumb little things that diminish the fun factor slightly, keeping it from being as good as Banjo-Kazooie. Not by a whole lot, mind you. It's certainly not to the Nintendo 64 what Donkey Kong Country was to the Super Nintendo, but it is a damn good game full of fun shit, some not fun shit, some fucking stupid beaver shit, and a billion collectibles. If any of that sounds good to you, give it a shot. But like I said, it's fucking bananas.